Good evening and welcome to this episode of The Big Picture, Big Conversations. My name is Tom Mukwana. I'm your lead co-host for the evening. Week in, week out, I do this with my co-host, Justine Wanda.
Hey, everyone.
Justine is a comedian, she's a satirist, she's a human rights activist, and she's also an award-winning writer. Next to Justine is one of us, and by one of us, I mean one of the reporters here at Uncensored, Felix Mudoka. Felix is a fact checker. He's also an investigative reporter. He's on this episode of The Big Picture for a reason. He produced a documentary called Lost in the System. That documentary is fresh out. If you haven't watched it, we're about to run the trailer, but briefly, I can explain what it's about. It's about a system which excluded many Kenyans. Millions of Kenyans still don't have identification cards. And your ID, the document that you walk around with so casually, could mean life or death, or a future that is stagnant, or a future that moves forward. For many Kenyans, it's a future that's stagnant, and their stories are not told enough. And so Felix went to tell that story. Here's the trailer to Lost in the System.
We always say citizenship is the mother of all rights.
Kila jambo lazima uwe na kitambulisho.
Felix?
It starts with a birth certificate, to ID, to passport and all that.
Niko na 25. Kienda pale unataka 18 years. Na una birth certificate, unaongeza shida tupu.
That we are not Kenyans, we don't have a right to own lands.
Kwanzia voting, job, kama sisi hatuna, imeinda mini progress yetu umeona.
We will be able to launch digital ID.
On registration of Kenyans onto a digital platform.
It's okay to go digital. We are not fighting the government.
Why I'm saying this should concern Kenyans because who even had access to the system? What would they do? There is so much power in the digital.
Lost in the System, available for you to watch at any time on YouTube on our page. And aside from Felix today, we have another guest. Her name is Aurelia Miheso. Aurelia is the Technology and Human Rights Officer at Amnesty International Kenya. Amnesty are particularly important for this conversation because they are a point of research for Felix's production that I've just spoken about. They produced a report called Ready or Not, and it's a citizen's perspective on Maisha Number. Maisha Number features heavily in that documentary, as you'll notice if you watch it. Aurelia, asante sana for making time. We're really glad to have you here. Felix, to start with you, what's Lost in the System about?
Lost in the System is about the government rationale in digitizing Kenyans' data and to streamline government services. So the government wants to give equitable access services to everyone. So its rationale is, if we go digital, we are passing some barriers that would have been there. So we want access to public and private people. But in the documentary, you'll find that there are some people who are excluded to those services due to the nature of where maybe they come from, that is from border communities, marginalized communities. Some of them, their family, maybe one of your parents is not a nationality from here, but one is from here, and you are born in the middle. So Lost in the System looks into their stories and how the digital public good could be framed. The digital could be framed as a public good, but sometimes it could also have some underlying effects just below. So we're looking into the effects that those people are facing that the digitization does not curb.
Yeah.
So we must be able to jump that before we go to digitization.
Yeah, we'll get to the people that you interviewed who have deeply troubling stories. Aurelia, what does digitization of an identification system mean, or digitization in general?
So it's basically transforming the physical ID, the current physical ID that we have, into a digital copy of the physical ID. So just the same way you have a physical ID with all our personal information, now having a soft copy of such on the online, on any online platform. So that's basically the whole understanding behind a digital ID.
Yeah. And so what does that look like? Does it mean I just give you my face, you scan it, and every detail, every history of myself pops up, or what does that look like?
So I will use the Kenyan context of digital ID, and I'll start by giving a history of how our national ID system have transformed since the colonial period. So during the colonial period, we started with the Kipande system, and then that was improved to a Kitambulisho system. And then after the Kitambulisho system we had the second generation ID, which was, of course, after several improvements, is what we are currently using, our national ID. So now in 2018 is when the government wanted to roll out what was the common Huduma number, the Huduma number project. And this project basically was digitizing our identity system in terms of integrating all our identity system in one system. So during that process, when it was launched by the former president, and there were various complaints about how the information was being collected and how it was being processed and how even secure that information was. So we had the Nubians Rights Forum together versus the AG case, which went to the courts. And now after what is it called? After the hearing of the case, the process was actually termed as unconstitutional, specifically because there was no sufficient public participation in terms of collecting the information, and also there was no comprehensive data protection framework in place to ensure that the information that was being collected was done in a lawful manner.
Okay.
So that's the whole reason why the Huduma number project was termed unlawful and unconstitutional.
But now we have Maisha number.
Yes.
What's the difference?
So now that was so the case was like the judgment was passed in 2019. Now in 2019, we had a Data Protection Act, which was at that moment was a draft in the parliament. So now that the Huduma number project was quote unquote tupiliwa mbali because of lack of a comprehensive data protection framework and the public participation bit. So the draft that was in parliament was actually made law. So now we have a Data Protection Act, which is now in place, that is solving problem number 1 of Huduma number. So now the government again tried to roll out the Maisha number project. So the Maisha number project in itself is a project that has 4 components. So we have the Maisha number, which Maisha number is the number that babies are allocated, same as you have the birth certificate number. So we have the unique personal identifier, which is the Maisha number. So when a kid is born and has this Maisha number allocated to them, then they are able to move through the system with the same number. So that's the number they'll use for registration for school. That's the same number they'll use when they are trying to get their national ID until NSSF, NHIF, KRA.
Does that make it easier in any way?
In terms, ideally, yes.
Yeah.
But practically, there's a gap.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the...
Just to put a little span in the works, because you've said that we have the Data Protection Act in place, right?
Yes.
I just have a little bit of a pushback on how that framework is supposed to protect someone, especially because all this data, we're presuming that it's well stored, well taken care of, because we have the Data Protection Act in place. But do you find this kind of like hyper-surveilled storage as a safety issue, or is it we should just trust the system as it is? I'm asking this because I don't think we'll have an opportunity to delve into it in this episode, but I'm curious about if the data protection works as it's intended.
So, as any other legal framework, there is the intention of the legal framework, and then now we come to the practice of the legal framework. So, in a nutshell, the Data Protection Act should actually is in place to specifically protect our information when it comes to the collection, to the use, to the storage, and even to the deletion, the whole processing activity of any personal information. Now, in relation to what system is in place and whether that data in that system is actually safe or not safe, it's you can't really say whether it's safe or not. You get, specifically because you have to look at things like the technology infrastructure around the system, who are the owners of the system, who are actually in charge of the system. Because now, when you're looking at a good digital ID technology system, is that is supposed to ensure that there's a right to privacy to the citizens. The technology system itself is actually owned by the state. Yeah. Now that begs the question of whether, because our current National Integrated Information System is eCitizen. Yes. And that is the one that Maisha number should is to be integrated, the all components of the Maisha number. So how much control does the government have over our eCitizen? That's the question. Yeah, so there are other questions that are now linked to us. The framework is available, but whether the framework is sufficient enough is a gap. Yeah.
Felix, when you're conducting field work for this story, you met some people.
Yes.
Some of them are featured in the documentary.
Yes.
What were their stories?
So mainly we had like two characters. One was called Toma. Toma had an issue with a birth certificate. So when she was young, she was a baby, she was abandoned by her biological parents. So a relative took her to be able to raise her up. But now the problem is, as Toma grew up and was not able also to access education like the rest of people. Since you require KCP and KCSE, you need a birth certificate to be able to register for those exams. So she was not able to get that education. So her son's, what is even troubling is her son's education. So he's in from class 3, sorry. So her class 3 son is supposed to go to class 4. But NEMIS requires you to have a birth certificate so that you can register. But since he doesn't have a birth certificate, Thomas says that the son is begged to repeat until she gets the birth certificate. And then also Thomas speaks about the discrimination that she's also facing even from the family that raised her, since she's not like valuable at the moment, if that's a word. She's not bringing input into the family. They see they are trying to discriminate her and push her away. The second character was called Aaron. Aaron was born. Aaron's had a parent who, one of them was from the Kenyan nationality, another one from Tanzania. The dad was a Luo from Suba. So Suba is at the border of Kenya and Tanzania. So that is why when Aaron went for the ID, he was told he's from a border community, he's supposed to go to Suba for vetting. But according to Aaron, he's been in Kibra for almost 40 years. The relatives have been there. He's been living there. He even has his school documents showing that he studied in Kibra, not even in Suba. But they're still sending him for vetting in Suba. So that has been still today. Aaron has not been able to get his ID. His brother and his sister are almost finishing. So he was hoping that maybe if he got the ID, he can sponsor the rest of the parents. So the problem is the mother is Tanzanian. The law says that either parent can be Kenyan given by either parent. But the problem is the dad passed away. So the dad is not there to put the fingerprint for the son.
So he's locked out of the system for that.
Forever now. Aaron will now face the consequences of
what consequences?
Of their data not getting digitized, which is not getting education, jobs, healthcare. You cannot register like for SHA. You cannot register for government services. Even you need eCitizen for people to log in. You need an ID. It tells you scan. Yeah. So I think that those are some of the things that we also met. One of the person, Maka, told us that there was a dad who had a biometric issue. So the dad was a plumber. So the dad was not able, the biometrics were not matching. That was also something that came up. The technology, sometimes it does the good, but it excludes people whose fingerprints are not matching.
Wait, so if like you work certain types of jobs and your fingerprints can't be recognized, the system is like, you're not a person.
Yes, you're not. Yes. It's like proof of identity is so paramount than identity. Proving that that you identify is so important than you you being
Your
here.
actual identity.
See, but you're here. Like, why is that? They don't have like a various forms of biometrics that qualify, or is it just like the fingerprint that's the primary source?
So most of the time, fingerprint are the primary source since they have unique prints. But the fingerprint, also the technology uses something called a deduplication algorithm. So algorithm matches. For example, in the documentary, you'll get Grace was explaining that your finger cells, your cells grow. So once you take your fingerprint, like right now at t-0 second, and then take t-7 seconds after 7 seconds, the algorithm is going to use the match from this to this and match if the closeness is there. So the technology experts will argue that it's a must match 75%, must match 90% regarding on the probability which will match. And regarding how it will match is how it will prove that it is you who's using the system.
Yeah.
So if your fingerprint gets worn out or something happens, you're not able to access the system.
So everyone stay away from any fire right now. It's going to mismatch. That's terrifying.
It's crazy in a country that has a lot of informal jobs as that the means of earning an income. Aurelia, how often is it that when you were researching for this report, ready or not, you met people like Toma and Aaron?
So when we were doing the research, we did in 9 counties, and we were doing the research based on we had 3 hypotheses, and one of that is that we are testing the level of readiness for the citizen for the Maisha number rollout, and also how they perceive the whole process and how ready they were for that process. So when we were doing the research and sampling out our participants, so the participants for our focus group discussions were from all backgrounds. So we had women and women who were in terms of religion, women who are stay at home, women who are quote unquote in some sort of employment. We looked at men, we looked at youth, and our goal was basically to have like as wide perception as possible. So, and on addition to that, we interviewed specific communities that are not currently identified, or they're not identified as a main tribe in Kenya. So we did interviews for a community in Kwale, such as the Makonde community. We did interviews for the Nubians he mentioned, the ones that stay in Kibra. So we wanted to actually get the raw feel or experience of the national ID and the Maisha number, and how that will transition into the Maisha number project. And as Felix said, it is so unreal when you are in a city and you grew up and you have both your parents, and getting an ID was as smooth as possible. So all you could do is walk to your chief or assistant chief, fill out the forms, and get that ID within, say, a month. Or even if there are delays, it's actually the system delays, but you'll eventually get your ID. And then there are communities that even before you reach the phase where you're actually populating the form, you actually do proper vetting. And as he mentioned, for example, the border communities apply like in Turkana, in Suba, he mentioned. So you find that when you're starting the initial step of doing the application is that you look to the chief. The chief might even say, I don't know you, based on how familiar your family was, or I know you. Now, based on the perception of the chief,
You can get it or not.
We had the first initial step. That's when they'll decide whether you're bringing your immediate parents, or we've even had cases where someone had to bring their great parents. Yeah. So you find that once you do all that and come up with bring their documents, that's their birth certificate and their national IDs, then now you can proceed to the next stage, which the next stage is filling out the form and meeting a vetting panel. Now, going back, we've just mentioned the case of Toma, where she was like abandoned.
Yeah.
So she didn't have the ID, and of course she couldn't trace the parents. Now you are in a scenario where you have your parents and your great parents, and all of them don't have IDs. So that definitely means you cannot fill out the forms based on the details that are required.
Yeah.
Or your parents have their IDs, but the IDs are not sufficient to prove that to fill out the form, so they need to bring their parents' IDs. And for sure, years back, most of our grandparents didn't even know the year they were born. So most assured is they even didn't have those IDs. So that means as an 18-year-old born in right now in 2022 or 3, meaning I can't get an ID because my parents, yes, they do have their IDs, but their parents don't have IDs.
Oh, really? It's 63 years since independence.
Yeah.
There isn't a solution to that problem yet.
So far there's no solution, and the best solution that has been offered is scrapping the vetting so that these people no longer required to face the vetting panel.
Vetting panel.
Yeah. But there's no tangible solution so far. And that means the historical injustices that were happening 50 years before, 30, 20, it's the same injustices that will happen even to a kid that will be born in 2030, for instance.
How successful is vetting as like a guardrail?
And just to give context, I come from a border community. I had to go through a vetting panel, but I was very lucky because one of my relatives worked within the vicinity. So it was mostly like I can show proof of a person who knows me and all these things.
Yeah.
So just, I don't know if he wasn't there, I don't know if I would have been able to get my ID or I would have become one of those stateless people also, which is ironic because my siblings had IDs. So I am also very curious about what Tom just asked, like how effective is people who actually are probably not as familiar with you, making sure that you have an ID or like understanding, oh, this is a person, we can account for them. And are there any consequences also that goes back to the panel in case your statelessness can't be proved, can't be disproved, like you are actually a citizen, you stayed here. What happens if the panel is not wrong, but doesn't understand the extent of what you're struggling with? Yeah.
So first of all, as I mentioned, there's the perception thing. So you said you got it because a relative was employed, and so they had an idea who you are or your family ties. Now imagine for someone, because most of these vettings happen within the districts, like the district commissioner's office or the ACC and BCC offices. Now, usually those offices are situated within the towns. Yeah, take for instance Turkana County. So those offices will be situated in Lodwar town. Yeah. And then now imagine someone coming to Lodwar town from Lokichogio or Loima, the far-flung areas. So definitely the members of the panel don't know this person, and most likely they don't know their parents. So already that means there is a bias based on the fact that I do not know you, and so I cannot either give it a yes or a no. So from the research, we found out that some of the individuals seeking the services actually had to go to an extent of paying for the vetting panel approval. So you've traveled all the way from whichever sub-county that you are. You've used your cash to come for that panel session. Then you have to pay, actually not to pay, actually to bribe for you to get a pass. Now there's that. And also the panels don't sit so often. Yeah?
How often are they, like if there's
There's no routine.
There's no
routine. There's no law that requires them to sit monthly or bi-monthly. So if you had a session, say this month, and then they decide there's no sitting next month or the following month, that means you're gonna stay without the ID for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
so
And that means that is just the process.
Yeah.
Now there's a process of you getting vetted. After vetting, whether you
Pass
pass or you fail, that's when you proceed now to filling out the forms and your biometrics being collected. So there's all that with regards to access to even the registration offices.
Yeah.
And then now there's the bribing to get the service in itself. And then there is just the inconsistency of the officers actually sitting more often.
Yeah. And so before we went on with this episode to record all of us, we asked our audience, 2.3 million Kenyan adults currently have no IDs. Which of these, by these I meant services, due to lack of identity cards, sounds like a nightmare to you? And a majority of those people, 36% of them, say no voting is a problem. But also just underneath that is no job opportunities. Felix, Toma, and I remember particularly Aaron saying that he gets accepted to jobs, but because of the mere fact that he doesn't have that ID, they tell him they can't employ him. And what's life like for him because of that?
So life for him, even being to the composition of vetting, he underwent vetting. So he has gone through the panel. He's been told come for this day. He's come for that day. That day the panel is not sitting. And also the Nubians, as I was researching for the documentary, they were telling me that vetting usually happens on Tuesdays and Thursdays and happens from 9 to 12. Just that. So the rest of the days, you can say normal Kenyan or ordinary Kenyans are allowed to apply ID at any time. But Nubians specifically, from 9 to 12 on Tuesday and 9 to 12 on Thursday.
Nubians specifically?
Yes.
Why is that?
They were vetted because Nubians are a special group since they are from Kibra, which Kibra is not a border community. Kibra is just some few
in the middle of Nairobi,
minutes away from the CBD, but they experience that because of their Arabic name. So they undergo the ethnic Somalis the way it is hard for maybe the person who's at the register to know this is a Mohammed Somali, a Mohammed Nubian, or a Mohammed Mohammed maybe Arabic or something. So they have to undergo through the same process. So for them, they had to undergo through two vetting. So the elders vetting is when the people who know you, elders wa kijiji, they just put a finger for you and they say, okay, we okay you. Then after that, you go to the national vetting. And for Aaron, he's really said from his experience that he's passed through a lot, to say the least. In the docu, also the day that we went to shoot, he was gracious enough. He was at work. He was working at a site in Jengo is a good way to put it into perspective. So he was working at a construction site, and he was gracious enough to give us an interview and continue working at the same place. He also has a shop he's opened, and he's selling charcoal and sweets. So he wakes up in the morning, find charcoals and try to distribute to the hotels before they wake up. But the reason why it has costed, lacking an ID has costed him a lot is because he cannot apply for the formal jobs. Most of the formal jobs require you to have an ID.
KRP,
NSSF, NHIF. Now you go. It's like an entry point is the ID. Then the ID opens a lot for him. And now since he's with his mother, and then he's looking at his siblings who are behind him, and they're like, these people don't know what's ahead for them. They are going to suffer
the same thing.
The same thing I am suffering here. Yeah. He's even saying that there are sometimes they get these jobs called government jobs called Kazimtani. They come, they're asked, can you bring an ID? And since he cannot just bring an ID, they all know him. He's been living there. Some of them, even his friends are taken to the same job, but he's excluded just because he doesn't have an ID.
Not because he's not Kenyan, he hasn't lived in Kenya, was born here, but because of those small issues.
And also, the border issue is such a thing that you can talk about, since The Anglo-German agreement is what drew these border regions that we have right now. So before 1890s, even the 1900s, people used to live like we're all Africans, we live in one pot.
Borderless.
Then someone came, and then suddenly you were told these people and these people. So if I was living here and my family, I had an auntie on this side and an uncle on this side, how you defining us even? So even the way you define even border communities in the border regions is also something that should be specified, how you get to the border regions, how you get to the regions and everything. So yes. And also maybe towards something that has been put as a solution to the issue of getting IDs. Some societies have put forward that we do away with ethnicity as a requirement for getting an ID.
That's a problematic discourse.
Yes.
Felix, that's a problematic discourse. And we'll get to the solutions later in this conversation. Justine, you?
I think one of the things that I'm curious about, just to hear from both Aurelia and from Felix, is that has the digitization process just digitized the colonial kipande? Because if we look at historically people who've been marginalized, even there's a time when women were not like counted as people. So it's like you have to walk around with your husband, or you're not like counted, or like your male relatives really accounted for you to be a human being, like you existed as an extension of another person. So has the government, or is the government just digitizing the kipande system, like extrapolating that and causing even more chaos in people's lives? I think Aurelia, you go first.
So, one, I think I'll start by what's a good digital ID, like the ideal digital ID would look like. And number one is an ID, a digital ID that is based on the legal framework. Yeah. So the Kenyan Constitution says every individual has a right to legal identification. It doesn't say people born in cities or people born
border
communities do not have a right to legal identification. It says every Kenyan has a right to legal identification. So that has to be replicated when adopting a digital ID. Okay. Now there's the second principle where the digital ID system respects the national values for this particular country. Now, the same. Does our Maisha number or our digital ID respect the national values of this country? Does it respect the cultural value? Does it appreciate or accommodate the cultural values of this country? So those are some of the things that when adopting a good digital ID, that we have a legal foundation for all this. So now, speaking to what you said, is we are trying to cure a problem, not even cure. We are trying to create a solution, but not addressing the problem. So one of the problems that has been consistent is the exclusion of these vulnerable or the marginalized communities from the legal identification. And that's why all through these communities have been fighting for them being recognized as a community in Kenya. So, and I'll use an example of the Makonde community. So when the president visited the Makonde community, and actually as one of the main issue has been the legal identity, because apart from living within the community, they can't access government services. They can't go to the hospitals. They are basically, you're living, but you're not living. You're surviving, So when the president visited the area, and the people that attended that forum registered during that particular forum. So the people that registered are actually the ones that got their IDs.
So if you were there that day,
you got your ID. But if you're not there, you have no ID. And your kid can't have an ID. You get? So just moving the same into a digital ID, because looking at how the digital ID system is deployed, is actually following the same parameters that were applied with the physical ID. For example, if I am born today and my father has an ID, then the process is smooth.
Mhm.
But if I am born and say I lost my father, so I can't access their ID, I can't locate my mother, I am not able to get my ID. Yeah. Now look at how the system is being rolled out. The parameters are still the same. So meaning we've not addressed the historical injustices of the marginalized communities, even with the rollout of the digital ID. So I would agree with you. We are just duplicating whatever existed without actually. It's like we are proposing a solution to a problem that we do not know or to a problem that we do not want to cure.
Yeah, I think best to describe it as number 2, problem that we do not want to cure. Because if you're a country that has existed for 63 years, you know where the problem is.
Exactly. And you find that these communities are actually looking at their history and how they got into Kenya. And having lived all that in these communities, they're usually getting an ID by naturalization. So they meet that criteria, even if also now the kids that actually born in Kenya, they're actually Kenyans by birth. Yeah. So now looking at it and how the digital ID system is being rolled out, then definitely we are duplicating without addressing.
The core issue.
So it's just problems with extra steps.
Yeah.
Can we add
actually an expensive problem?
Yeah.
Even the way the NIMS was introduced, the NIMS Act was introduced by amending the 1947 Registrations Act.
What is NIMS kwanza tuanze?
NIMS was the National Integrated Identity Management System.
Mhm.
That is maybe the anchor of Huduma number, and that is maybe the anchor of Maisha number right now. That is the anchor of what is, if maybe you have another president who brings another number, he'll have he'll anchor on the same NIMS.
Yeah.
So NIMS is the anchor of the system. So the way the system was introduced, it was introduced by introducing an Act 9A Act to introduce the digital ID component by just amending the 1947 Registrations Act, rather than writing a whole new system now that we got independence and we can govern ourselves.
So you basically had the word digital.
They just added digital on top of it, and then they went away with it.
It's a new system.
Yes.
Okay. So we asked, so the government has been on a drive targeting over 1.5 million new IDs to specific counties right before the 2027 election. And so we asked our audience, is this a step towards equality or a strategic voter preparation move? And 87.5% of them said it's an election strategy. Does that reflect the reality? Both of you will answer the question, but first, Aurelia, is it really an election drive? Is it a political choice? Because the president had this problematic conversation when he went to northeastern Kenya at some point last year. And he's been going on this drive saying that to pay an ID. But is there all goodwill, or is it all politics?
Okay. So disclaimer, this is a personal opinion. Yeah, this is a personal opinion, but I would look at the timing, number one. So it was not a priority area when you started this in 2022, 2023. So it was not a priority area. And if you remember, even then, getting a passport used to take like the whole year to get. So I would ask myself, why is it a priority now? Okay, that's number one. So the timing, and number two, the areas of target. I haven't had such a conversation within Nairobi or within Nakuru. It's been Mombasa, na huko ndani, Turkana, Northeastern, the regions where the problem has been there, but it has not been addressed. But then you're looking at it from a political angle, is that these regions they do not have like a strong alignment to any coalition at the moment. So what can you do to ensure that you get the numbers from these people? Give them an ID. And given that an ID has been problematic getting, so it means they're like indirectly bribing them, because it's like you are hungry and then someone tells you, let me give you food, and then
I'm your savior.
exactly. So definitely, if you give me food and I was dying after a whole week lack of food, I will definitely adore you. Yeah. So it is the same approach I will use when looking at it. Specifically because the issue has been there. People have been going on without IDs for like 6 months, 1 year, and with frequent visits to the Huduma centers. So how come right now, when you are less, are we less than a year? No. Yeah. But you are in the campaign mode. Yes, yes. You are very active. So meaning you're doing this so that you can lure them in terms of facilitating a need for them.
But I'm looking at it as that person, and as you said, it looks like the savior is there, but politicians have been promising this for years.
Yeah.
And it's finally being done so close to an election, and you've described it perfectly. But what are the dangers?
Let me just add like a practical example that we got to encounter in Turkana, and it's the same tactic that has been used by politicians. So a politician will come to your household and collect your names, including kids as young as 3 years, 4 years. And when they collect your names, is they go and actually produce IDs for you, including that 3 years. Yes.
So you don't need to.
Yeah, you don't need to go anywhere.
A 3-year-old with an ID.
Yes.
What does that say about this?
So you go, the IDs are printed, unaletewa.
That's something you.
Bro,
Yes,
that 3-year-old can get a job.
That is a lived experience in Turkana. So they come with these IDs. But then what happens is when now it's time for voting, those IDs get collected and they actually participate as voters. Yeah. So it's like umetumika tu. Because now tell me why a 3-year, 4-year-old requires an ID. And then now what they do is they even don't use your actual names when producing those IDs. They give you names. So now for this person who's 3 years, they have an ID allocated to them, but it's not in their names. So now when they get to 18 years, they'll definitely have an issue getting an ID.
Getting an ID because they're already in the system on a different.
Yes. Now linking that, the experience in Turkana, to what exactly is happening currently, then you see like there's a huge
question marks.
Question marks, and that actually tells us something about our whole ID system.
ID system.
Yeah.
Right. We'll wrap that conversation up there. We'll get to, so we usually have 2 segments, Aurelia. The first segment is Serikali wants to hear from you. And this is where we tell you what you can get involved in the coming days. And for today, we have 2 specific things that are happening in the country. First of all, Thika municipality or Thika town, whatever you want to call it. Most of you are watching, maybe you obviously know where Thika is. I don't know why I'm even describing it. Thika is about to be a city. And this is because the Senate has received a proposal to make Thika the 6th city in the country after Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and Nakuru. And then in 2024, the last town to be made a city was Eldoret, the president's hometown. Now, there's a process to making a town a city in the country. You don't just wake up and name a town a city. First, there's a board of municipality which makes a resolution and applies to the county executive committee. So now it's gone to the county level, and then the county executive committee considers that, and it either accepts or turns it down, but then it also ends up in the county assembly. So the county assembly then approves the recommendation for the conferment of city status, in this case Thika. So it was approved by the county assembly, it was passed, and then the clerk of the county assembly transmits the same resolution to the Senate. Now this is the National Assembly for consideration. No, the Parliament, I mean. So the Senate then looks at it, the senators debate it, and they let you participate in it. So I don't know if you don't want Thika to be the 6th city in the country. Interesting to hear why you wouldn't want that, but it's up for your proposal. So you can send. There will be a public hearing on this matter on Friday 6, 2026 at Thika Municipal Chambers. Those are probably the best people to speak about this in Thika town, and members of the public are invited to participate. Aside from that, you can send your opinions and you'll email them to the clerk of Senate, because this is a thing that is being handled in the Senate, through email at senate.devolution@parliament.go.ke and clerk.senate@parliament.go.ke for your submissions to be had. And the deadline for that is March 9th, Monday, 2026, 5 p.m. Do you want Thika to be a city? Do you not want it to be a city? Send your opinions. I'm sure they'll have fun reading those. And aside from that, we have the Public Management Amendment Bill 2025. Now, this one is a tricky one because just recently, Nairobi Governor and the President of the country, William Ruto, signed an agreement that gives Nairobi a huge budgetary allocation way above other counties to streamline a lot of services that will pour back into your life. But this specific bill is related to it in a different way. It does not directly affect that because that's a government to county government deal. This particularly affects one budget item, which is the an item that's called conditional grants. Every year, the county government, you'll correct me if I'm wrong because you're CPA. Aurelia, every year counties come up with budgets, and part of that budget, a lot of that budget actually comes from the national government through the county allocation fund. So part of that is conditional grants, where their public entity, in this case, a county government or the national government, manages the risk of non-performance by attaching significant conditions to the ongoing payment of funds. So in this case, it's Nairobi government, for instance, receiving 1 billion from the government, and the grant is then released in tranches. So it's released in phase 1, phase 2, depending on the performance of the implementation of those projects. I'm just laying ground for this new amendment because this amendment expunges or repeals like 5 sections of an existing act, the Public Finance Management Act. Now, the implications could be huge because conditional grants run in billions. Some of these repeals are affecting measures like guardrails that are put in place for county governments to ensure that they're using these funds for the right things. So for instance, if Section 191A of the Public Finance Management Act, which touches on conditional allocations, is expunged, it means that without formal intergovernmental agreements that are signed, it weakens enforceability conditions. So basically, your county government will then have access to funds and they won't have to account for them. And then weakened Senate oversight. A lot of these funds, as the Act stands, they have to be set and approved by the Senate and also the County Executive Committee. What this bill would do is it would remove that. So there's almost zero oversight on how the conditional grants will be used. Loss of guaranteed public participation. Section 191B of this Act has you participating as a part of this entire process of the grant implementation. If this passes, it means that you will not have a voice in how your county spends these amounts. And this is just 3 of some of the implications of the passing of this bill. That's why you should read it, go and have a look at it, and submit your opinions to the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning. And you have until March 9th, Monday, at 5 p.m. again to submit your opinions. These might seem like small things, but these are the small things that take and chip away at your financial freedom and access to services like healthcare, good roads, and good drainage systems, because it's raining in Nairobi. You don't want that to happen at a bad time. Submit your opinions. These are 2 things that you should care about, and let's hear from whatever the government has for you next week when Serikali wants to hear from you again. And now Justine will explain everything badly.
First of all, let me just say, Thika, if you are looking into becoming a city, check what happened to Eldoret's water bills and electricity bills, and then make your decision. In our one. So this last week there was a 2-day robberies because the presidential visit in Lakisama turned unlucky for multiple residents as some of the boda riders robbed them and beat people up.
Now, two suspected criminals were lynched by an angry mob on Wednesday in Nairobi after groups of riders allegedly went on a robbery spree targeting pedestrians, including police officers. The incident occurred shortly after a group of riders left an event presided over by President William Ruto in Eastlands, Nairobi. Police say several suspects have been arrested and investigations are underway, calling on victims to record statements at their nearest police stations.
Nairobi should just start workshopping its new name, which I'm saying is Gang Zoo, because from all the amounts of goons and guns currently showing up and thriving in different neighborhoods.
Groups of boda riders descended on pedestrians across multiple locations, from Thika Road to Westlands, Chiromo, Kileleshwa and Kilimani, robbing unsuspecting members of the public.
So people across this country are fighting for their lives, dignity and passes due to the endless gun activities we are seeing. No one is safe because these border riders are even beating up cops. Pedestrians who've already lost their battle for sidewalks with borders now have a new trauma update from whoever's at the back of the borders. Because you're thinking, is this border a goon-wheeling service or am I profiling a person and their passenger? Kenyans now have to leave their homes and enter the great goon trek to freedom, which has left some of the people injured, while SHA is figuring out whether it wants to work or it's just bonding with reject claims. The goon expansion program in this is happening in various cities and towns, from Nakuru to Eldoret or wherever you get your podcasts from. So Nairobi entered the NMS Season 2, the collaboration after the governor agreed to a cooperation deal with the government. Dimples zimeingia mchanga, but part of the deal was a proposed Nairobi Metropolitan Police Unit. Could this sudden increase in crimes be a way to manufacture consent for the installation of this new system? Well, we'll just have to check the new CCTV installations and the AI surveillance that is being set up that copies the New York Police Department to find out.
Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen has outlined how the proposed Nairobi Metropolitan Police Unit, which is expected to be established within the next 2 months, at least a framework preparing for it, will operate.
Part of our plans is to make sure that we incorporate the business community in the city. Generally, because we want to ensure that their CCTV systems are interoperable with the police ones, so that it is quick to carry out investigations when we have issues.
Having this much insecurity in a country that is heavily invested in defense and increasing police budgets really diminishes Kenyans' faith in the system. And we already lost faith at LSK. We can't keep going on the hope of just like having hope for the safety of all of us as citizens. And speaking of safety, Kenyans may have been unbuckled from safety, given that the Interior CS and the renowned watch collector said that someone somewhere is handing out tear gas to the wrong people.
Hatutoroki leo, zima hiyo kitu mkutano iendelee. Zima hiyo kitu mkutano iendelee, hatutoroki leo.
Is this one of the tear gas canisters that imaginatively found itself a buyer or a thrower?
Zima hiyo kitu kama bangi. Zima hiyo kitu kama nyongi ya jana.
Kenyan tear gas is so ambitious, it's even getting new markets. But its lifespan is on the line because...
Funika na jacket, mkutano lazima itaendelea.
So the CS even said that he can tell for a fact, without a shadow of a hair follicle, that it's not cops using tear gas on people at rallies. If you watch that clip, there was a guy right there who had his BS radar go up a couple of earlobes because it's coming from the cabinet secretary himself. What does he mean, somebody somewhere? That sounds like a TV show that was written by Nameless. Also, if you're the Interior Cabinet Secretary, the design of Kenya's security system should be glistening from your mind like that first mirror glance after a Kinyozi visit. You should be Marie Kondo up in this getting rid of what doesn't serve the security of this country, unless you're facing a real Kikulacho scenario where the cops themselves are implicated. As John Allen said regarding how fortress capitalism presents itself,
something that I'm noticing is becoming a very big part of transnational repression in East Africa, and that's fortress capitalism. And a good way of understanding it, or a simple way of understanding it, is when wealth builds physical, digital, or political walls to keep out the very people that they profit from. So here are a couple of symptoms or factors to think about if you are an East African and you're starting to see this in your country. Number one is how security is becoming a growth industry. So you'll see it at both ends of the spectrum. You'll have analog violence in the form of goons or unruly mobs being unleashed on the public at a moment's notice. You'll also have this very sophisticated digital surveillance infrastructure that is usually bought or sourced from other countries that are part of now the global digital surveillance ecosystem.
Is that what's happening, allegedly? And on to the higher education, higher miseducation, if you will. Kenya's higher education is entering the lower stretches of Mapambano as it faces a 260 billion funding gap in the proposed budget. This shortfall threatens over 650,000 students, meaning that the new funding model didn't even survive the runway of reality. The new funding model, which places students into bands, and not even cool bands like Sauti Sol or Kodong Clan or We Are Nubia, it's just bands according to their wealth and poverty reflections. This new funding model has not worked out like most of my New Year's resolutions. I promise I'll go to the gym. I've just started on the Chinese calendar. Ndo imeanza. So before this administration wheeled in 2022, public universities had a 60 billion in pending bills, but that number currently stands at 85 billion Kenyan shillings. You can accomplish a lot in 4 years, even if it's just increasing your loan rotations. Fuliza experts will agree. The university funding model had more promises than a relative you will never see again, from increased budgetary allocation, timely fund disbursement, increased access to education, and even a unicorn ride-off to the sunset of employment. However, barely 2 years after its introduction, the funding deficit in universities is threatening staff salaries, infrastructure development, student loans, scholarships, and other when I grow up hopes and dreams. And lastly, businesses are about to cage off. Higher education may be facing off with low funding, but at least some reprieve is coming to business owners. The deputy president took a break from this pneumonia exposure.
Mayo kwenda mpaka Nakuru na Mausame, wachana na hiyo. Fire si fire. Sasa ukinipatia mwavuli na wananchi nao, kama mwananchi ananyeshewa, si hata sisi tunyeshewe? Ama mnasemaje jameni? Fire. Ama mnasemaje jameni?
To announce that the government is launching another project called the Kenya Jobs and Economic Transformation, KJET.
The yet to be rolled out KJET project. KJET is the Kenya Jobs for Economic Transformation project.
So every program named by this administration is about relocating people to the sky. KJET, Nyota, bottom up, and even the way they stop protesters. The KJET program will focus on businesses that are more established and need equipment for value addition.
It is supposed to support perhaps business people who are a little more established, but they lack equipment for value addition and better business activity.
So I'm not even going to knock his newfound deeper Homer voice, because this is actually a solid initiative. The import costs for machinery into the country is relatively low. However, the landed cost is often very high due to administrative levies, VAT, and logistical expenses. These costs can be a real cog stopper for those in the businesses. The cost of energy is also extremely expensive, so hopefully these machines are running on solar, nuclear, or the power that Mbosso sings about. If only there was an entity in charge of this that could reduce these charges significantly, or finance the research institutions or universities to come up with more inventions and machines that are needed. I'm looking at you, Kenyan Parliament, and other key policymakers. But maybe it's a bit of a waste looking at Parliament. One of them hasn't even spoken in any session. Maybe he took a vow of silence against anything that requires reading. I hope all the Kapseret problems are resolved and they're living in a policy utopia. So transparency may have been wrestled to the ground by this administration on very many occasions. But hopefully, this new rollout for KJET has a clear selection criteria and the benefits are going to go very, very much further in these wheelbarrowed economic times.
Interesting. Kapseret, man. Another honorable appearance. Another honorable
Of course, like it's consistent.
He who is named shall not be named.
Yes.
Okay.
You have to know he's consistent.
Aurelia, asante sana for coming. I don't know if do you think there's an end in sight to all the suffering that people like Toma and Aaron go through?
To answer that, I would basically give you the recommendations of our research. And given that the implementation of Huduma number was termed unconstitutional because there was no enough public participation. So how about we address the question on public participation? How about we roll out the entire Maisha number project in phases so that there's the Kaizen effect, the continuous monitoring, evaluation, and improvement. How about while doing that, we do not attach a high cost to actually getting accessing the identification documents? How about abolishing the entire vetting process, because you've already discussed and seen that it's actually not objective? And actually, how about moving the Data Protection Act from being an ideal to actually ensuring that the data protection framework during and even after the implementation of the digital ID system is actually adhered to? So those will be my main recommendations on ensuring that we're actually addressing this problem. And the end goal of this, just to ensure that we have a human rights respecting digital ID system in place, ensuring that we are adhering to the Article 13 of our Kenyan Constitution, that is the foundation of every Kenyan citizen having a legal identity.
Asante, Aurelia. Felix?
Or maybe she said everything. But maybe I can add and say, maybe Maisha number system is in court.
Yeah.
In less than a month, from March 17th to March 19th. So, as what happened with Huduma number, the project, we were registered, 38 million Kenyans were registered, and the project stalled. So, we are yet to know where the data of Maisha number is, since the data of Huduma number was in the company IDEMIA, and we are yet to see that data being given to us. So, we are asking, in case Maisha number system also goes down, the government ought to give transparency in the people who are connecting Kenyans' information and things like that. So it's for us to be aware in the data conversation that you also had here. So for us to be very aware, who are we giving our data, who's the sovereign over us, because they can just take it and use it at their own peril.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant. And integrity is not something Kenyan government is known for. So asante sana, Felix. Asante, Aurelia, for making time. Justine, as usual, asante sana. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for watching this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one. The picture returns next week. Bye.